The Princess of the Fillmore Street School. Olivia Sharp. The Princess of the Fillmore Street School, by Marjorie Weinman Sharmat and Mitchell Sharmat. Illustrated by Denise Brunkus. Published by Yearling. Copyright 1989. Chapter 1. Mrs. Fridgeflake leaves a note. My name is Olivia Sharp. I work out of a penthouse on top of Pacific Heights in San Francisco. The penthouse actually belongs to my parents, but right now they're in Europe. I got a letter from them on Saturday. I put it in my important answer soon basket. Anyway, you get the idea. My parents aren't around much. I have an owl, Hoot, for company, and a chauffeur, Willie, and a housekeeper, Mrs. Fridgeflake. And I have my agent for secrets business. That means I'm a detective, and I specialize in secrets. I'm an agent for secrets. If you're in trouble, call me. My first client was Duncan. He answered one of the ads Willie and I put up around town. My second case began on a school day. I had just gotten home from school. I was hungry. I can't stand eating in the school lunchroom. What with the tuna fish sandwiches flying through the air and the squashed banana that I almost sat on. I went into the kitchen. It was empty. Mrs. Fridgeflake was in her room watching TV. But she had left me a watercress sandwich and a note. I munched on the sandwich while I read the note. Someone named Desiree phoned. She says she needs help. She's on her way over. Desiree. I knew her. She was part of my first case. I had a file on her. I wondered what she wanted. Could she have a secret to tell me? Chapter 2. Little Miss Perfect. I got ready for my new client. I went to my office. As usual, Mrs. Fridgeflake had picked up every speck of dust, fluffed the chair, cushions, and waxed and shined my red telephone. I pulled out Desiree's file. It said, "She's perfect, needs help badly." I took out a pad of yellow paper, sharpened 2 pencils, pulled up my socks, sat down at my desk, and waited for Desiree. I didn't have long to wait. The house phone rang. It was Willie. "Miss Desiree's here to see you, boss." I told Willie to show her in. A few minutes later there was a knock on my door. "Come in," I called. Willie opened the door and announced, "Miss Desiree." She looked just as I remembered her. Her face was scrubbed. Her blonde hair was tied with a rainbow-colored ribbon. Her dress was neatly pleated, and her pointy-toed shoes were shiny. She looked as if Mrs. Fridgeflake might have just dusted and washed her. I motioned to her to sit down. I sat back in my chair and waited to hear Desiree's secret problem. Desiree leaned forward and looked me straight in the eye. "I want to be princess of our school," she said. This was a secret problem? I glanced at the red telephone on my desk. Maybe it would ring and I would have a real problem to solve. "I didn't know our school needed a princess," I said. I made a note to check up on these things. "The school doesn't know it either," Desiree said. "Yet." I crossed out my note. Desiree smiled. "I have this book, Princess Faith's Book of Do's and Don'ts. It tells all about being a princess. I found out that I'm exactly right for the job." Desiree fluffed her hair. I was getting curious. "Why do you want to be a princess?" Desiree stood up. She pulled a piece of paper out of her pocket and started to read. "Being a princess means never having a frog dropped down your back. Being a princess means never having to eat leftovers. Being a princess means never having to sleep on a bumpy mattress with a P under it. But best of all, being a princess means helping others to be perfect like me." "What do you mean?" "Watch me," Desiree said. She whipped out a comb and pulled and tugged at my hair. Then she circled around me. "Now you're perfect," she said. Suddenly she bent down and whispered in my ear. "Don't tell anybody about my plan yet. I'm just starting to try it out. I came here to get money for my campaign. May I have 10 cents, please?" I fished in my pocketbook and pulled out a $10 bill instead. Desiree wasn't a real client, but I've got a soft heart for anybody who asks for help. Desiree looked at the $10 and scrunched her nose. "It's wrinkled," she said. I rang for Mrs. Fridgeflake. When she came, I said, "Please iron this $10 bill for Desiree." As Desiree and Mrs. Fridgeflake left, Desiree waved goodbye and said, "Being a princess also means getting to eat chocolate-covered cherries while wearing white gloves." I made some notes on my yellow pad. Desiree has a problem, but it isn't what she thinks it is. I tore the paper off the pad and put it into Desiree's file. I closed the file and put it away. Chapter 3. Going Crazy. My red telephone rang. "Olivia Sharp, agent for secrets," I answered. "The world is coming to an end," said the voice on the other end of the line. It was Duncan. I said, "I thought your world is coming to an end stuff was gone." "It was, but it's coming back. Desiree is driving me crazy." "I thought you wanted her for a friend." "I did. I do. But she's going around school trying to make everybody perfect." Today she ordered me to stand up straight. She polished Sheena's shoes without asking, and she's trying to give Mortimer a haircut. I swiveled around in my chair. I knew why Desiree was doing these things. It was part of her secret plan to become a princess. Now it was going to be my job to tell her that her plan was bad, bad, bad. I stopped swiveling. "I'll see what I can do," I said to Duncan. I hung up. Chapter 4. The Secret's Out. I walked out of my office. I went to my furry white chair and sat down. I had some thinking to do. I looked out at the ships way off in San Francisco Bay. Sometimes I feel lonely when I sit in that big chair and look out that big window. But not that day. I had to figure out how to stop Desiree from bossing everybody around, and I wanted to do it without hurting her feelings. Things hadn't gone well that day. I had just missed sitting on a squashed banana in the school lunchroom. I had given Desiree an ironed $10 bill, and she would probably buy more shoe polish with it, or a horrible haircut kit. Some days are good, and some days aren't. But suddenly, that day was good, because I had just learned from it. A girl who wants her money ironed would certainly like her school neat and clean. I went to my office and called Desiree. She answered her phone. "Desiree, your future princess." I could tell this would not be easy. "Olivia Sharp here," I said. "Why did you answer your phone that way? I thought your plan was a secret." "It was until you gave me the $10, Desiree said. "Now I can afford to go public." Things could only get worse. I said, "It's a really great afternoon for a drive, don't you think? Why don't I come by in my limo, and then my chauffeur will zoom us about town in royal style while we talk about your campaign?" "Great," Desiree said. I rang for Willie to bring the limo around. Chapter 5. Princess in Waiting. I grabbed my boa and dashed out of the penthouse. I took the elevator down to the street. As I settled into the back seat of the limo, I said to Willie, "To Desiree's house, and then up and down and around the town." "Splendid day for a ride, boss," Willie said. We rolled out of the courtyard, through the big iron gates, and onto Steiner Street. Desiree was waiting outside her apartment house. She was wearing a purple dress with a bunch of pearls looped around her neck. She also had 5 bangle bracelets on each arm, and she was carrying a rhinestone purse. She must have emptied her mother's closet. Grandly, Desiree stepped into the limo as if it were hers. As we pulled away from the curb, she smiled at me. She didn't know that I was now operating as Olivia Sharp, agent for secrets. She didn't know that I had a plan to help Duncan and Mortimer and Sheena. And come to think of it, myself. I had just noticed that my left shoe was getting scuffed. If Desiree noticed it, I could be next on her list. Chapter 6. Does ooh mean yes? We drove off. I turned to Desiree and asked, "Since you're running for princess of the school, don't you think you should help the school?" Desiree's face lit up. "The entire school? Every single kid?" "No," I said. "The school itself. The building, the classrooms, the desks, the blackboards, and above all, the lunchroom. Today I almost sat on a squashed banana." "Ooh," Desiree said. "I could make the school look perfect. Ooh." Was that a yes? I hoped she'd stop bugging the kids and start working on desks and benches and blackboards and walls and floors and windows. A school never needs a haircut or a shoe shine. A school is never told to stand up straight. I stared at Desiree. At last I knew she was a client. She needed me. This princess business of hers was getting her into a lot of trouble. I opened my pocketbook and peeled off $100 bill. I checked it out to make sure it looked ironed. "Here," I said. "Take this and use it for anything you need." Desiree inspected the bill. Then she said, "I'll spend it on some flower pots for the halls and classrooms, and some soap for the lunchroom, and things like that." Willie drove us to the Emporium. They had everything Desiree wanted, except ironed rags. When we let her off at her building, Desiree was loaded down with shiny shopping bags. Willie helped her carry them inside. Chapter 7. What did Hoot know? When I got home, I fed my owl Hoot. "I've just wrapped up a case, Hoot," I said to her. Hoot hooted. That bothered me. I wondered what she knew. I called Duncan. "I have solved your problem," I said, "and Mortimer's and Sheena's. Desiree won't bug you any more." "How did you do it?" Duncan asked. You'll see, I said. Now answer this question. Is the world coming to an end? Not any more. Fine. I hung up. I took out Desiree's file. Desiree wanted to be princess of the school. Maybe she'd make it. Maybe she wouldn't. But I had done what I could. I wrote, "Case closed." I put the file away. The case wasn't really closed, but I didn't know it then. Chapter 8. The Desiree Touch. The next morning I went off to school. Willie had just left me at the curb when Mortimer came up to me. Mortimer always looked scared. He said, "Duncan told me that Desiree won't be bugging us anymore. Is it true? Have you saved my hair?" "Your hair is safe," I said. I went into the school. I didn't expect to see Desiree because she's not in my class. But I did see a flower pot near the drinking fountain. I saw it after I stumbled over it, and a folded napkin was hanging neatly from a ring next to the fountain. It was obvious that Desiree had been there. What else had she done? Chapter 9. A most important call. An hour after I got home from school, my red telephone rang. I was in my bedroom, polishing my left shoe. I rushed into my office and picked up the receiver. "Olivia Sharp, agent for secrets," I answered. "Olivia?" I heard a deep voice. A grown-up was calling me. I grabbed my pencil. "This is Mr. Baybreath, the principal of your school." I already knew what Mr. Baybreath's job was. What I didn't know was why he was calling me. "I have a problem," he said. "Can you come over to the school right away?" I had already been there once that day. But a case is a case. "I'll be right over," I said. I rang for Willie. I grabbed my boa. "Back to school," I said to Willie as I climbed into the limo. "Didn't you learn enough today, boss?" he asked. "There's always more to learn," I said. The fact was, I could hardly wait to find out what Mr. Baybreath wanted. Chapter 10. The Handshake. When we got to school, I went straight to Mr. Baybreath's office. He was sitting behind his desk. His desk was almost as big as mine. "Sit down, Olivia," he said. I sat down opposite him. "I saw your ad, Agent for Secrets, on the school bulletin board," he said. "I need your help for a problem in this school." I felt important. The school principal needed me. Mr. Baybreath leaned across his desk. I leaned toward him. He was the principal. I was his agent. We were equals. He said, Desiree told me that she's running for princess of this school. We don't have any rules against that. We don't have any rules for it either. Mr. Baybreath cleared his throat. However, this morning Desiree started a campaign to clean up the school. She washed the blackboards in 5 classrooms even before the day's lessons had begun. She put flower pots on window sills, and they fell crashing to the floor. She painted some of the benches in the lunchroom. Mortimer sat on one and got paint all over the seat of his pants. His mother is very mad. Bare blackboards, crashing flower pots, painted pants, mad mothers. Nothing is safe. No one is safe. And that's against the rules. Mr. Baybreath fingered his necktie. I can tell Desiree to stop, but perhaps you can do it better. I squirmed in my chair. How much did Mr. Baybreath know? I now knew I had given Desiree a rotten idea, along with $110 in wrinkle-free bills. Sometimes money buys trouble. I stood up. I'll do my best, I said. I shook hands with Mr. Baybreath, gave him one of my business cards, and left his office. Chapter 11. Believe me, Your Highness! I went straight home and reopened my file on Desiree. I wrote, How can I tell Desiree to stop doing something I told her to start doing? Think! Think! I put the file away and called Desiree. We have to go to the school, I said, right now. I've already gone to school today, Desiree said. You have to go back, I said. Believe me, Your Highness, you have to go back. I'll pick you up. All right, Desiree said. I was getting tired of going to school 3 times in one day. I rang for Willie and grabbed my boa, and a few minutes later we were on our way. To Desiree's, and then to school, I said. School again, boss? Willie said. Still learning, huh? Chapter 12. No towers, no turrets. We picked up Desiree. When we reached the school, Desiree and I got out of the limo. Don't move, I said. Stand here and tell me what you see. I see my beautiful drawing of a tulip in the 3rd window of the 2nd floor. Forget your drawing, I said. Just look at the building. Does it have any towers or turrets? No, but it has a playground and a nice sign that says Fillmore Street School. Right, I said. Is it a palace or a castle or wherever princesses hang out? No. So far, so good, I said. I pulled Desiree inside the school before she could say anything else. This way, I said. I led her down the corridors until I saw the principal's office up ahead. Tell me what you see, I said. I see the principal's office, Desiree answered. What does the principal do? I asked. He's in charge of the school, Desiree said. Exactly, I said. When a school has a principal, it doesn't need a princess, too. Oh? Besides, trying to be a princess made you very bossy. Desiree looked at me wide-eyed. Bossy? She said. I didn't want to be bossy. I just wanted to be perfect. You can't be both, I said. Choose. I choose perfect. Good choice. Desiree looked sad. But it isn't easy to lose a kingdom, she said. Cheer up, I said. We still have one more stop to make. Chapter 13. Fit for a Princess. I pulled Desiree back to the limo. To the Regal costume shop, I whispered to Willie. When we got there, I rushed inside. I was back in a few minutes with a package. I handed it to Desiree. Even if you can't be a princess, I said, you can still feel like one. Desiree opened her package. Oh, what a beautiful crown, she said. I'll just wear it at home and for special occasions. Desiree held her crown on her head while Willie drove us to her building. When we got there, she stepped out of the limo, turned, smiled, and curtsied. Chapter 14. Keeping in Touch. Willie and I drove home. I went straight to my office and took out my file on Desiree. I wrote, Case really closed. I put Desiree's file away. I wrote a long letter to my parents. I told them everything. Well, almost everything. My parents aren't really interested in tuna fish sandwiches flying through the air and a squashed banana. Then I started a letter to my cousin, Nate the Great. Dear Nate the Great, have you ever had a princess for a client? I almost had one at school. Let me tell you about her.